podcast series Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Annette Evans, Head of People at GPS. Global Processing Services is the trusted and proven go-to payments processing partner for today's leading challenger brands. GPS's highly flexible and configurable platform places the control firmly in the hands of global fintechs, digital banks, and e-wallets, enabling them to deliver rich functionality to the cardholder. Hi, Annette. How are you doing?
Hi, Stacey. I'm really well. How are you?
I'm good. How's the last couple of months been for you?
Well, I think this year for everyone, it's sort of been a whirlwind event that none of us did really, hasn't it? So, yeah, for me, it's been great. It's been busy for, any HR team who has had to deal with the pandemic. But, I think onwards and upwards at this point.
Did you have to make a lot of changes regarding the way you interviewed or onboarding? What was the biggest challenge coming from an HR point of view?
It's interesting that you sort of start on that question because I think for a lot of HR professionals, we are used to, doing the recruitment process in a certain style. So typically it would be, face-to-face meeting. Usually before that, a lot of employers look at telephone interviews, then a face-to-face. And then, you'd get the opportunity to meet members of your team. That hasn't been the case this year.
I imagine so.
We've had to really just be innovative in terms of how we start to recruit and onboard individuals. There's been a lot of focus and emphasis on, what virtual tools can we use to keep people engaged, to keep people connected to the business. And we have sort of moved our process, and I think this is for the long run, actually, into ensuring that even though we don't see you maybe in the physical, there are aspects like, virtual videos that we can embed in our communications with you, just to keep you connected to us and to see a face behind the screen, which is important, right?
Definitely. And did you guys take a break from hiring just to regroup and figure out the way forward? Or what did you do at the beginning stages of the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning, for everyone, so not just employers, employees, there was a big question mark around what does this mean for me? What does this mean for the organization? What does this mean for the roles that we have? What does this mean for my own career progression in the business? And we took a short break, and it wasn't necessarily anything to do with we didn't want to recruit. We took a short freeze that really enabled us as a team to start thinking about, okay, when we come out of this pandemic, where do we want to be from a forecasting or headcount position? And so we use a lot of that time really to focus on some of the internal employee communications that we currently have, and how can we sort of improve that process moving forward. For me, it was a difficult time because there was the whole, options of, do we furlough staff? Do we not? What happens from a budgetary perspective? How can we start, supporting our staff who essentially are going to be working at home for, 6-12 months? And so the freeze was more about finding our feet more than anything, and understanding that there is a new way of working and there's definitely a new way of hiring.
Important. That's definitely important. Well, Annette, tell me about your life journey and what led you to becoming head of people at GPS.
Life journey. I feel quite old you saying that. The journey has been quite interesting because I started off prior to sort of going into any form of industry. So straight out of university, I decided to just take some time out, like a lot of us do, and figure out what I wanted to do. So I initially majored in law. So I have a law degree.
Oh, wow.
And I have a law degree. It doesn't feel like it now. It's been a long time since then. But with law, I think for anyone who's sort of either been through it themselves or know somebody who does have a law degree, it's a very, very difficult industry to get into.
Mm-hmm.
So I find myself, at home, back with the parents and thinking about what the next step should be. I did some agency work and sort of got into HR just as a sort of fluke. But at that point, I realized, well, actually, this is sort of like the final dissertation that I did, which was on employment law. And yeah, at that stage, I sort of connected the dots. Is this fate? Is there a reason why I'm here? And I have to be totally honest. At that point, when I came out of university, I didn't even know what HR stood for.
Wow. And look where you are now.
Look at me now. I never knew what it stood for. And it took, I would say, sort of 3 or 4 years within the HR sector to really start understanding what human resources is all about. And I'll sort of talk about why I'm head of people and not head of human resources. That's a whole different story within itself. But so I did sort of 3 or 4 years specifically within the public sector. And then I remember there was one day where I was sort of meeting with a few recruitment agencies and discussing our preferred suppliers list for the year ahead. And one of the recruiters said to me, Annette, honestly, this is not a dig, but you would do really well in the private sector. And I sort of looked at him and thought, well, that sounds brilliant. I'll be in the private sector and I'll take it. Not the best way to sort of have a conversation with the recruiters that you are sort of working with. But that was my first step into technology, the world of technology from a HR perspective.
And you loved it ever since?
Honestly, if we talk about learning curves, I think I've learned the most I ever imagined to. Just for example, within two years and a bit being at GPS, this is such a fast-paced industry.
It's a different world.
It's a different world, and I always say to family and friends that ask me about working in FinTech, what does it take? And I said, well, it takes you to be able to run. Because that's where the industry is going.
Start training now.
Start training now because every day is different and there are new technologies arising around the corner. You have to be somebody that's got your eye constantly on the ball.
You have to enjoy it too. You have to enjoy the change and enjoy keeping on learning.
Right. And I think that's probably one of the most important bits with sort of working within this territory is you have to be excited. You have to be excited
Definitely.
About what the next, and I say the next 6 months could bring because it's that fast.
Yeah.
What the next 6 months, what the next 12 months could bring, because what you think you're going to be doing in the next 6 months is very unlikely from the standpoint of how the ecosystem works and changes rapidly. So really interesting sector to be in right now.
Yeah, and you've spent a lot of time finding fresh developers that can take products to the next level. Many find this extremely difficult. What do you look for in the search and interview stages?
I think if you take it back to basics, FinTech would be nothing without developers, right?
Of course.
There would be no FinTech without
There would be no product.
There would be no product, there would be no industry. So although everybody within the industry is important in their respective roles and responsibilities and expertises that they could bring, being a very good developer and bringing excellent developers on board is absolutely imperative. It's imperative to ensuring that we start to expand our products. It's imperative in ensuring that we get our product out there in an efficient manner. But what I would say for sort of the developers that do come into the industry, what you tend to find is a lot of developers, they come in all shapes and sizes. Some like to focus on blockchain, some like to focus on AI. There's quite a different few areas that, they like to come with their expertise. But what I've found is sharp technologists sort of understand the development in the world that they're operating in today. So they're very astute when it comes to knowing, what products are about to be developed in the industry, ensuring they're up to date with, FinTech publications. Those are the real ones that you want to, bring into your organization. So an example is, you would have like a web developer interview, for example, and ask the web developer, what's your awareness of current issues in, let's say, web development? If you're unable to answer a question like that with something quite solid and concrete that shows your interest, the likelihood is for a company like GPS, we would look and think, well, actually, can you take our product to the next level if you're not actually connected with the ecosystem? So really important for any developer to really optimize the publications, there's 101 different focus groups out there, or, networking groups for developers. You have to be in tune with all of those. So that's one thing I'd definitely say on that side. And show what products you've worked on or you're working on. Sometimes the likelihood is you are doing a lot outside of work. So you're doing a lot of sort of your own research, or even, as a developer, you're probably building quite a few products outside of work. Talk about those. Let us know. It makes us more interested in who you are and what expertise you can bring to the table. The main attributes of any developer is going to be around problem solving. You can't be a good developer if you don't have an interest in solving a problem, right?
Yeah.
So it's about, thinking about how you do your problem solving. So do you do it individually? Are you a team worker? And what can you bring to the table? So we're really interested in, our people and essentially what they do outside of work. So tell us about it. Engage us.
That's great advice. One challenge we've seen a lot of hiring managers face is a lot of developers hopping from one job to the next, whether it's just under a year or just over a year, and they hop from one job to the next, and they really struggle to find developers that are loyal or just love the product and want to stay for that reason versus just hopping for money's sake, let's say. I know that GPS has an excellent retention rate of 3.5 years, which is incredible, first of all. I just really want to know, what do you think drives your employees to stay and thrive at GPS?
I think we sort of mentioned it, and it is, being at the forefront of cutting edge technology. No developer wants to work on a product that is stagnant and has really no really upwards trajectory in terms of, once you get that product out, what else do I work on? So what I always talk to my talent acquisition manager about is, when we are talking to candidates, that's what they're interested in. They're interested in the what's next. And if we're unable, or if you as an organization are unable to have that conversation about what's next, what's exciting about the work that I'm going to be focusing on, the likelihood is that individual may take the job because, they might need a job at the time. And sometimes it's very unlikely. Developers are the most sought after role.
Oh, I know.
They have a plethora of opportunities. Agencies are contacting them left, right, and centre. A lot of them know their worth. And so what can bring that developer to GPS or your individual company, it's being able to clearly articulate what that product is and what it means for them and how they can take it to the next stage. One thing I would say is sort of in a post-COVID environment, there is going to be some issues around engagement. And so where we do have a good retention rate at the moment, and we can see our employees staying for sort of 3.5 years plus, that may change. And it may change for a lot of organizations that have not really encountered that problem before. Because engagement, it's engagement virtually. You know, how do you know if somebody is enjoying their job? You might, for example, do a 20-minute stand-up with your team on a Monday morning or at the beginning of the sprint. But then after that, how are we keeping in touch with them? How do we know that they're enjoying what they do? Have we upped the communications? What does your staff survey say about that particular cohort? So it might be your developers that you really want to do a bit of a focus on. But on the flip side, as you probably know, a lot of developers are introverts, and actually lockdown is a godsend. Lockdown can be a godsend for many, and has actually brought a lot of light into their lives in terms of not having to do the commute, etc. So I would always say that the retention rate for now, for a lot of organizations, is probably pretty good. A lot of people are not jumping from role to role due to job security in the pandemic. However, things can change. So it's important that you get your key stakeholders on board and we understand, okay, what's the touching points that you have with all of your employees to keep them engaged.
It's also important to mold great talent. Let's talk maybe pre-COVID. Once you've identified the right candidate, the right fit, how do you then build them into high-performing players?
Yeah, so I think this is probably the biggest challenge of retention at any organization is how do you build a high-performing team? And a high-performing team is likely to have sort of individual contributors versus, people who are just generally big team players. So for us, we focus on quite a few different areas of how to sustain that. The first being, do you have like a clear career progression path? So a good a good view of what the organization looks like from, okay, I've come in as a junior developer. How do I get to be a mid-developer? Actually, now I want to go into cybersecurity. How do I do that? Now, if you haven't thought that process out clearly as a business, what you tend to find is people are sort of waiting in limbo for you to say, hey, why don't you think about going left and becoming a BA, or why don't you think about going right and becoming a chief architect, for example? Now, not all managers will do that. I think we've all had sort of managers in our own careers where some have really pushed you to sort of climb the career ladder and others sort of just let you go at your own pace. And we make massive emphasis on clear career progression paths for all the way from, somebody who's just come out of university to even our chief, our C levels at the top of the pecking field.
That's
Everyone
awesome.
should have one. Yeah.
Is this something you'd bring up in interview stages, or when would you start introducing this?
Well, we talk about it from, straight off the back. So when we are having that conversation, that telephone interview, which is usually the first step, you hear a lot of talk around, so what happens when I get into the organization? What's the career progression path like? And we're finding that is a question that is being asked much more regularly than it used to be. And so at GPS, where we're still pretty new. One of our employees today, I was on a call, described GPS as a young adult with big aspirations, which I thought was which I thought was quite amazing.
That's a compliment. That's a massive compliment.
No, it definitely is, and we've come a long way from sort of not having any sort of formal processes in place to like being the pioneer and leading in a number of initiatives. So what we do say is that career progression path has become paramount to us and our attrition rates and our retention rates, and we need to ensure that each person within the organisation is aware of that. We have what we call two mid-year assessments. So we have, 1 year mid-year assessment and one end-of-year assessment. And within those conversations with your line manager, there's always a clear question around career progression and where the individuals see themselves in the years to come. So it's always at the forefront of any discussions that we have with our staff.
I love that idea. A conversation I was having with a hiring manager last week, we were chatting about the difference between an average developer and a phenomenal developer. And what she was describing to me was a phenomenal developer can do 30 times what an average developer can do. And she was telling me the importance of just finding really great talent and finding that phenomenal talent. And we're trying to discuss it together. We're like, what does that look like? And I know you answered in the beginning, just asking certain questions, finding where their passions lie. But do you have any other tips to anyone looking to hire a developer? Just finding what does that phenomenal talent look like, or how do you develop them into this person?
The question of the century.
It's a tough one.
It's a tough one, but I think there are a lot of organizations making some amazing strides in this. And one thing I would say is, before you even get to how do I bring on the best developer, the best, HR professional, what are you looking for? So what are your company values, and how do you align those potential candidates to your values? So we know a lot of people come out of uni and or have gone through sort of extensive training in order to get into their chosen career path. So usually that's not an issue around, suitability or capability for the role. But aligning the values to the right fit is probably more important, in my opinion, in getting the right people on board. So we at GPS, we have, for example, 5 values that we embed in every part of our recruitment process and every part of our employee life cycle. So an example of one of those values is togetherness. That's one of our GPS values. And togetherness is all about not just, linking arms and, walking around the office and being pally. It's about collaboration. So can you collaborate together with different people within the organization? There could be different designations, there could be cross collaboration working. It's important because we believe that key value is a direct path to success. So
I love that.
Our return on investment is if we all collaborate together and there is togetherness in all that we do. Now, if there is no togetherness, and, an example would be a developer can sometimes turn around and say, I really like to work on my own and I just like to work on my own. Now, you can be an amazing developer who sort of, as you said, churns out 2 times as much work as, somebody else within your team. However, do they know what you're doing?
Yeah.
They have the opportunity to input into it, and it might be amazing work, but then what does that also bring in terms of togetherness within the team if one person is working in a siloed manner or fashion? So we use those values within the recruitment process. Our questions are focused on those values. Honestly, yeah, I can't tell you how much we focus on it, but we have to understand, or you have to understand as the employer, what's those key values.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually really, really helpful. I'm jotting all this down. So thank you. This is another thing I really want to dive into. And one, it's a passion of mine, and it's a passion of talent in the clouds. You were the first Black female to join GPS. How was that experience, first of all? And how are you creating a channel to bring together more Black women in the payment sector?
Yes. Oh, when you say it like that, so sort of first Black woman, at the time I didn't realise, I didn't know, because you enter any organisation and you look at the people around you and you make your own judgments. But just being one of the first Black females in the organisation, and actually one of the first Black leaders, or somebody that sits on the executive team, did put a lot of pressure on me, and still does to this day.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it does, because you are seen as, okay, and that's the pioneer. We're going to follow through in terms of whatever Annette suggests. And sometimes I don't have all of the answers, and I think it's okay to say that. So there's been a steep learning curve for us as an organisation, and we have really pushed out the boat in a number of areas. But I think it's keen to say that within the payment sector, within FinTech in general, within the Black community, there's not a lot of knowledge about sector. Nobody really knows about it. And this is not to do with, I wouldn't necessarily say just within the Black Afro-Caribbean community. This goes back to, STEM being taught better in schools, and new age industries such as FinTech being discussed a little bit more. We all sort of understand that cards or card payments has been around from, from the 60s and above. But if you think about when actually payments and FinTech that arose, I can remember Chris Skinner talking about it only really started in sort of 2014, 2015, where we started focusing on, the FinTech. And there's a lot of people that don't know about it. So we're really working with some key players within the inclusion and diversity sector to raise that awareness a little bit more. We did something not too long ago called Listening Forum. And essentially what this Listening Forum was about is listening to our Black employees and understanding sort of where they've come from and how they can develop their careers more within FinTech, as well as encouraging, the areas around us to really take note of this amazing industry that a lot of people are not aware of at the moment. So really encouraging women, especially Black women, to come into the payment sector. And, there are different ways. You don't have to be a developer. You can be like me. You can do HR, you can do risk. There's UI, UX, sales, you name it.
I couldn't agree more. Annette, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It was lovely having you on.
Brilliant. I've had an amazing time. I'm hoping that this chat will really help people think about what FinTech they would like to sort of know more about. We are having an amazing time. I know I'm having an amazing time on this journey, and I hope we can bring some more people on board.
Where's the best place for listeners to reach you?
Always LinkedIn. I'm not too much of a LinkedIn poster. I do comment a lot, so you'll see me people's posts a lot. But feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'm under Annette Evans, and I will be there.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your team, or you yourself are looking for a new, exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.